or is it he's going to make indemnity payments to farmers and make the difference? So one of the things he did with the tariffs, which I thought was actually a pretty good idea, and I'm I'm he made payments to farmers from some of that tariff money. So that ended up being a net positive for a lot of guys, although the prices at the elevator were probably not very good. On the other hand, will he do that again? I don't know. That's a long way off, and right now prices are pretty low, and probably for everybody listening to this, that's a farmer is below their cost of production as of today.
Yeah, as you're saying all this, it reminds me. I do remember that he was kicking off a trade war with China. Everybody was all worried about it, including me. I'm totally a free market guy, but I don't really remember how it all played out. And to think like this is it's one, not saber rattling, and two, if I recall, there were some pretty big payments written out to farmers when all this went on to make everybody feel better, right?
Yeah, and it's not every guy necessarily. So I'm sure some people got left out in the cold, and I don't know all the details to that. But we work with over 600 farmers at Go Farm Yourself, and several said I've never made so much money during the Trump years, and that's with prices low. Now they might have had the right setup, they might have had this and that to maximize payments, or the right crop rotation, or cattle plus this, etc. We do know whether or not. It's interesting how this plays out, right? You got 100 days till the election, and we've got Trump, who has come out and already said what he's going to do on this one side, and then you've got the alleged nominee. Now, this is changing by the minute, in Kamala Harris. And what I do know about her policy, because she hasn't really done any of that, it's a hard read, right? But I do know her policy will be centered around what has been can be it. No, what what was that line?
Unburdened by what has what.
Yeah, what has been can be unburdened by what has been. Yeah, that's it. Let me say it again because it makes sense if you don't think about it. What has been can be unburdened by what has been. So, what does that mean? Well, we had $7 corn in the last few years, and we've had $3 corn last year. So I don't know which part she's going to unburden, but if she unburdens it and we go back to $7, that'd be pretty cool. So I don't really know. I would expect on her side of the aisle, it would probably Vilsack would stay as he's beloved here in Iowa. He will probably stay as agricultural secretary, and from what I'm hearing from most farmers, is he's doing a pretty good job trying to push, um, the to try to push for farmers, et cetera. He used to be here in Iowa and then got appointed. And the real challenge on the Democrat side is they're pushing this Green New Deal, which is pushing everybody to an electric vehicle. Obviously, if you do that, you push away from gasoline, you push away from ethanol, et cetera, which is not a net positive for farmers or biodiesel, et cetera.
So to me, when
Um,
when I was reading about this, and you're reading CNN, you think they generally have more of a left lean. What I think is interesting is by Trump coming out as a Republican in favor of tariffs, he's going to push the left if they want to be on the opposite of him to what? Free trade? Like this is going to be an interesting thing, and who knows how it's going to play out. But I know this is big news for the presidential race. Let's keep going, talking about some of the other big stories going on. I think one of the ones that we've got to talk about, and as soon as I posted that I was going to talk about this, I got lots of DMs about it, people saying their perspective. And the question is the Texas Farm Bureau selling out to the CCP? So yesterday I was on Twitter, and Adam Jones throws up a tweet basically saying, I am ashamed of my membership with the Farm Bureau. I can't believe I was ever a part of it. Look at what they're doing. So, somebody says something that bold, I'm going to go check it out. I go look at what's going on. There is a select committee in Texas that is looking at if it should be okay for people to sell their land to foreign interests. And specifically, they're saying, is this not in our national interest? Is there a danger to us doing this? And a bunch of people had different perspectives. There were lobbyists on all kinds of different sides on this. But one of the people from the Farm Bureau came up and said, hey, let me put forward my idea. I've been involved in the Farm Bureau for a long time. This is what my perspective is. I think there is a danger to there being foreign interests. So, but we're in favor of the free market. So what I think we should do, this is the Farm Bureau guy saying, he says, I think that we should just make sure that they must disclose if it's somebody from outside the US that's buying this, in particular if they're among these countries like North Korea, Iran, or China. And then it's still the farmer's choice. So the Farm Bureau is coming out saying we support farmers' freedom to do this, but yet we also think that there should be disclosures. But now the other side is saying, what are you doing? Are you nuts? We can't have foreign countries owning land in the United States. What happens if something happens? What happens if we have a fight with them? What happens if things go south? What are we going to do then? So, what about you, Rupert? You are a trader. What do you think? Should people be able to sell their land to whomever they want?
Well, I'm a free market capitalist, so the educated answer is yes, but I'm going to say no, and here's why. Right? I'm pretty simple in my political views. Border security, national security, education, and food security. There's probably some other ones that I'm not thinking. Equal rights. So the basics, very simple stuff, and stay out of the rest of my life. But when it comes to foreign ownership of our land, one, they for sure have to disclose it. But what if they do it through a proxy, right? What if they send 100 people over here to buy land and it's actually the Chinese government? Well, now all of a sudden we go to war with them and they own a bunch of our land. That gets very complicated. We've seen this in the cattle business in general with two of the biggest meat packers. And this is a disclaimer. Anything I say is my opinion, so beat it if you're upset with it. But we have foreign ownership of our packing capacity, almost half of it currently in cattle, and I think it harms the entire industry. The other thing I would say about that is in the hog business, a third of the hogs on feed, I believe that someone fact check me, in the United States are owned by a Chinese entity through a certain corporation, which will go unnamed. That being said,
Smithfield, right? That's what you're
that
talking about?
yeah, I mean, you said it. I don't know if that's actually the company. It's something. Anyways, my lawyers have said don't say anything about any of that. But yeah. So what happens if we go to war with them? What happens if how do we commandeer that back? How do we claw that? It's just a very messy situation on all fronts. And for me, I've always been a big believer in like and it's the same thing where they're trying to ban like TikTok because it has Chinese ownership. Well, why are we allowing them in our food supply? Food is way more important than social media, right? We can turn off social media, we can turn off the internet, we can crash the whole thing. We saw that last Friday with CrowdStrike. But to me, that is a bigger issue. And I do agree. I can see the argument that as long as we know who it is, but what's the vetting process, right? You see that in New York City and all these other places where you have all these oligarchs from Russia that are buying up apartment buildings and other stuff with, through a proxy. How do we know who that is? What's the vetting process? That's more what I'm interested in, before we agree to any of that.
Yeah, I'm very much like let people do what they want to do. But inside of a country, if you decide, hey, this is the way we want to do land ownership, I can appreciate that. My perspective is probably the one of game theory that says if somebody is doing something to you negatively, then you should probably do it back to them to put yourself on the even playing field. And one thing I know for sure is that the Chinese don't allow us to just go over there and start buying up
Right.
farmland. If you're gonna run a company in China, they have to own it, the large share of it. So I don't really know where to come out on it. My read was on what was going on social media was that the Texas Farm Bureau was kind of shown to be like, anti-American, and I think they were trying to represent their members to say we want to make sure that the land prices that our members can get for their farmland is as high as it can be. And I don't fault them for doing that. I think that's what they're there to do. They're there to organize for their farmers. Any last thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I mean the quick story on that, the parallel is, Bill Gates is the largest landowner in the largest farm landowner in the United States. Well, does he want any of that farm? No, he wants solar farms and this and that, and this net zero, and trying to push farmers out. Now, does that bid up land prices? Absolutely. But I'm for, the family farm, right? One of the reasons we started Go Farm Yourself is to level the playing field between Chicago and the farmer. And in that same vein, uh, having Bill Gates own 230,000 acres of land and what he does with that, I don't know. Is that valuable? Not really. But as an economist, I say, yeah, He's playing by the rules. Those are the rules that are set. So if we want to change that, we've got to change that at either the state level or the federal level, with our elected officials.
Yeah, well, I think one way to change it is to make it so there aren't so much subsidies for people to put up things like solar or wind, and it makes it so that
Agreed.
people have to pay the real fee for that. And that will lead us to one of our stories that we're going to talk about here in just a moment about the carbon pipeline. But before we get there, you and I were talking beforehand a little bit about the corn prices. Now, while this isn't a show about corn prices, it's a show about culture. I wanted to talk a little bit about the speculators in the market. The price of corn was about 401 today, the last I checked. Farmers' break even point is about $5 per bushel. Non-commercial speculative traders, they're making money off the fact that the corn prices are low. So what do we think of these bad traders that are in the market doing this stuff?
Well, so that this is one that has been a wildfire on X and the other social media platforms, that we shouldn't allow speculators in the market, and they're ruining the price. And yeah, right now it hurts, right? For a farmer to sit there and farm at a $5 break even and have a $4 cash price or lower, you're not making money and you're losing money. You're doing all the work, owning the equipment, taking all the risk. That being said, speculators have always been part of the market, right? So in 2021, they're speculating that the price is going to the moon because Russia invaded Ukraine. Well, now all of a sudden we have $7.50 corn when your break even is probably 450 before planters ever even rolled. We've never seen that. I've been doing this 25 years. We've never seen a price like that before there was a crop issue, meaning the reason we were at $8 is because no farmer had corn. Like in 2018, 2012, we had a huge drought across the United States. Well, yeah, the price went to $8, but you didn't have any corn to sell. Now, before you've ever planted your crop, which means you could grow 100% of your crop, you could make $3 a bushel if you grow 200 bushel corn, for easy figuring. Obviously, it's some number above or below that. That's $600 an acre. That's a decade's worth of money, where most farmers are trying to make $50 to $100 an acre. And so that's where nobody was crying when they were record long, and now all of a sudden they're record short. But if you have, this is an important caveat, and this is very unpopular with the people I share this with. If you have unsold grain in the bin that you've harvested and you haven't sold it, now it's one thing that you don't necessarily have to forward sell it because you don't know if you're going to grow it. And if you have variable soils, you can go from 200 bushel corn to zero in 3 weeks of no rain and hot weather. But if you have unsold grain in the bin and you have not sold it, you are a long speculator. You are the same thing as me or somebody else. That's what makes markets work, right? If I buy or sell gold or the stock market or GameStop or whatever, I'm a speculator. It's always been part of the market. Now, one could argue that maybe they're too big a percentage of the market, but those are the rules that have been set by Chicago and have been expanded. But to be honest, the market clearing price is always going to be what it goes to the processor end user, that what they can further process it, and they build all the steel and concrete and whatever, and then sell it as a final widget to somebody else, or they sell it to the next stage of the supply chain, which processes it again, and then eventually it sells to the consumer. Now, I know this isn't feasible for most farmers because I grow yellow number two. How do you sell that direct to the consumer? Well, you either have to create a business that then processes it and then puts it into animal feed or pigs or feed yards or whatever, and then further processes to get more of that dollar. Now, should the farmer get more money? Absolutely. But that's how capitalism works, right? It incentivizes people to take risks that may or may not work out.
Well, I think you got a good chance to make the case for the speculator. I'm a big believer in traders. You got to have it. They hurt you when times are rough, but sometimes they also even out the waves. We're going to go to the last story today, which I think is one that people are kind of vaguely hearing about, but maybe they don't know what's going on. And that is that there is being proposed a carbon pipeline that is running throughout the Midwest, and it is designed to take CO2 from the ethanol plants and the sustainable aviation fuel production, and they're going to take it to these sites and bury it, or I don't even know what they're doing with it. So
Who
Iowa
knows?
the other day said, or a few months ago said, hey, this is a part of the public utility. And so therefore, just like if we needed to do this for electrical wires, or we need to do it for water pipes or roads, we're able to use eminent domain. Well, a law passed in South Dakota that was similar to this, and the citizens freaked out. And with their freaking out, people like Amanda Radke, I've heard several other people in there, Jim Eschenbaum, got in there, got the voters to get together to put a measure on the ballot to say, hey, no, we need to restrict this power. What they're doing right now is they're taking powers that were controlled by the county and they're raising it up to the state level so the state can make it so they do a public utility on something that's actually a private business. There's a company called Summit Carbon. Is that what it is? Summit Carbon? And
Yep, that's
and
it.
they're going to be the ones that benefit from putting this thing in there. So they're saying, no, citizens of South Dakota, we do not feel like this is in our best interest. So Rupert, you're a trader. Before we jump into what should happen with that carbon, pipeline, is there even anything to sell or buy when we're talking about carbon credits and CO2 like this?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is becoming a huge market, this carbon credits. The virtue signaling corporations of the world, the Amazons that have pledged to go net zero, Google, whatever your tech company, I don't even know how you go net zero. I don't think you even do anything that involves carbon other than energy to run servers. So that seems kind of bizarre. This is coming whether you like it or not, right? This is a tradable market, whether it's RINs or multiple different ways of these carbon credits or tax credits and Z45 that's coming in January. This is all kind of part of this new initiative of this battle against climate change. And whether or not you agree with climate change or whatever, it's coming. I mean, this is one of the reasons I think Bill Gates, who we mentioned earlier, has bought up all this land, right? And then you say, well, Microsoft's going to be a carbon neutral company, but oh, I already own all this land and it's regenerative and X, Y, and Z. Now, does it change? The ultimate form of carbon sequestration, that's a mouthful, is growing crops, right? Uh, Corn literally uses carbon to grow the plant. Um, but it's a real market, and the federal government classifies liquefied CO2 as a hazardous material. So that's the same as propane, liquefied natural gas, or petroleum. Those all run through pipelines. Pipelines are the safest way to transport any kind of hazardous material. Studies have been done. Railroads. You saw the derailment in Pennsylvania, I think it was Ohio, one of those Rust Belt states, and by truck, it's totally
Sure, but
disastrous and one of
safety
those.
aside, what they're
So
proposing to do here is to say, farmer,
sure.
you don't want this here. You don't want to sell me your land to be able to run a pipeline here. Too bad. This is a public utility and you can't stop us. Something about that doesn't seem very American.
No. So I'm for freedom. So let me say this. The right answer to this is there is no right answer other than personal property is sovereign, meaning it belongs to the individual and they have the right to do whatever they want with it. So I can argue both sides of it that if, you know, the 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 cons are climate change is real. Do we know why? Not really. I've been told since I was 10 that the polar ice caps are melting and New York City was going to be underwater. That was 1986. By 2000. So we're 24 years past that, and we're still using those same arguments. And now we got a 16-year-old that's Time Person of the Year, allegedly, telling us this, but she won't go to school unless the air conditioning is set at 69. So again, it's all a charade, but it's a real market. And so we have to either play by the rules that are current or we change them. And since the federal level, carbon is classified as a hazardous material, right? It follows the same rules as petroleum, natural gas, etc. Right? Now, the pros of this is you can take advantage of this um, if it's for the common good. Now, obviously, South Dakota ruled against it after everybody got up in arms. And what's weird is I want to tell you this. This is a personal vendetta of mine because I hate the Sierra Club. Now, I like what they stand for, but they suck. All they want you to do is drive an electric vehicle. There is no question that is the wave of the future as far as what they're pushing to everybody to save the environment. Now, again, an electric vehicle takes more energy than to run gasoline. It's a pretty efficient engine, but diesel, gasoline, everything's going to be more expensive. That's what they want because they want you to drive an electric vehicle. So I never want to be on the same side of the Sierra Club lobby. I'll go on
Well,
the record with that,
the
and they can
Sierra
come at
Club
me.
to me is a PR firm, and they're just very very specialized on what they consider to be environmental. All right, we're going to leave it there. We'll talk more about this carbon pipeline, I'm sure, in the weeks to come. If you, as a listener, are out there and you have any news you think we should cover, you can always send it to my DM on X, or you can email it to me, Vance Crowe. Now we're going to move to a segment that I really love of the podcast, which is where we talk about unaligned opinions. This is where I invite my guest, Rupert, here to share an opinion that almost no one in his ag tribe agrees with him on. So, Rupert, if you can say shortly, what is an unaligned opinion you hold that pretty much everybody disagrees with you on?
So this is the one that I share the most with farmers in the United States. Everybody says those boys in Chicago. I'm a former Chicago Board of Trade floor trader. It was always this mystical place that was controlling your life and et cetera. And now the price moves all over the place and you're not getting paid what you think you're worth. However, your local basis, which is the market that's plus or minus Chicago, right? That's the logistics, that's the demand in your area, is doing more of the work than it ever has. Why? Because we produce 31.54% of the world supply as of 2023. We used to, when I started trading 20 years ago, we were like 60% of the world supply. China is the second biggest, but they feed it all to their people. And then now you've got this behemoth, which is South America. They get bigger every year. They have unlimited land. They will burn down the entire rainforest, I promise. They have no emission standards. They have cheaper labor. They're starting to get all the same genetics we have, and they are going to compete with us on a global scale. So what we need to do is accept that and acknowledge that, and then find local markets on how to use all this corn we produce domestically, whether it's ethanol, biofuels. SAF has been the big one. One of the reasons we support Renewable Fuels Association, ASA, and National Corn Growers as a company is because we need to consume. We can't depend on the export markets anymore. We export 51% of our soybeans. Think about that. We grow 51% more than we actually need. Now, I'm not trying to tell farmers to not be better growers. Make the biggest product you can, but where's the market for it? And if we have to depend on foreign markets in this geopolitical situation where if the Democrats win, then China will invade Taiwan in 3 months. Then what? Then they're not buying anything from us. And from the first Trump trade war, they've invested money up the upper Amazon to be able to load faster and grow, get the product to the main port, to the Panamexes, to them faster. I think they will continue to do that under Trump, and I'm not even convinced, as of what we're seeing this year, is that they're ever coming back. Not only that, their economy is struggling; it's going downhill. They cut interest rates twice this week, and you didn't see the price of anything go up. Now, that being said, one more thing is, if we can consume this domestically, then we don't have to worry about the rest of the world. I'm fine with that, and then your local basis will do all the work instead of Chicago.
Well, I do think you have a point there that very, very few people are saying, "Hey, we shouldn't worry more about exports. We should think domestically." I would say my counter to what you're saying is a lot of what you're talking about, these renewable standards that you have to have on gasoline. These are things that you are forcing on the domestic population. You're saying, "Hey, if we're going to blend in gas, then now we're going to make the regular public have to pay for this corn when they maybe don't want it." So I'm going to give you real credit here. I'm going to give you an 8-1 on your unaligned opinion, because I think this is something that I personally don't agree with, but I think you make a good point that thinking about domestic production is pretty important. All right. Now on to the final segment. This is a new segment. This is where we're changing up. In the past, I've been asking people, "Hey, tell me somebody that is worth following on Twitter." And I really like Clint Fisher, but these answers are boring, and so I don't want boring. What I want from this show is to cross wires and to arc things and to make things kind of shift up and try new things. So what I want to know is, who is a worthy adversary on Twitter for you? And by that I mean, who is somebody that you really disagree with, but you still respect enough to say, they're worth following on Twitter? Who do you think, Rupert?
Well, I struggle with this question because there's so many, and I try to follow people from both sides. But I would say Meat Idea on Twitter. He is a fantastic follow. When I met him, he was a small trader in the cattle pit. I used to trade in the live cattle pit, and he acted like he never lose. And he's one of the first people I met off Twitter. And as I got to know him, I challenged him to be much better. And he acted like he never lose, and all traders lose money. If you act like you don't lose money, you're not real. However, I can say this, and he's going to be mad that I said this. He's one of the best electronic traders on the planet in the live cattle and feeder cattle and hogs. So he is definitely worth a follow. You may not like his style, but he's very direct. And he and I battle. In fact, when I started Go Farm Yourself, he called me and he said, Snark, you need to give me 5% of your company. You screw up everything. You need my help. And I was like, well, you can go farm yourself. So, but I would say he is somebody I don't align with a lot of times, but he is an incredible follow.
Well, I think that's a good one. I had not heard of him, so I went and looked him up. He privates his follows, so hopefully he'll just be getting pinged
Oh,
with a whole bunch of requests.
bummer.
But um, the person I want to say, actually, I already mentioned him here today. I poke him all the time. His name is Adam Jones. He goes by Kansas Angus. And he is one of those guys I mentioned. He was the one that said the stuff about Farm Bureau. He has gotten in blistering fights with close friends of mine like Lyle Benjamin, and he drives me crazy. But he also is one of those guys that I think before I hit the tweet button to think, is Adam going to show up here and poke me for this? He's got different perspectives, and I really enjoy hearing what he has to say, even though on a lot of things we disagree. So I'm going to go Kansas Angus on that one. All right. That is going to do it for the show. I want to thank you so much, Rupert, for coming on. If people were interested in finding out more about Go Farm Yourself, where would you send them?
I would send him to gfy.ag. So it's 5 letters, gfy.ag. Don't go to gfy.com. You can find us on the socials at gfy_AG on X. And then I think it's gfy.ag on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Or it's one of those combinations. We're pretty easy to find. Or Go Farm Yourself.
Well, thanks, Rupert. I want to also, as we wrap up, suggest to visit our sponsors at legacyinterviews.com and farmtest.ag. If your business would like to sponsor the Ag Tribes Report to get the attention of farmers, ranchers, and decision makers across the industry, send an email to sales@vancecrowe.com. Right before we finish out, I'm going to announce that next week's co-host is a big one. It is going to be Jared McDaniel. I spoke with him today. He agreed to come on. He's going to come out of his shadowy hiding that he's been doing. He's been living in his world in Oklahoma, and he agreed to come on and share some unaligned opinions. So thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, feel free to disagree.